Hello and welcome to MySecurityTV. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with MySecurity Media. And welcome to our Tech and Sec weekly episode. This is our Tuesday afternoon episode. And today we're going to be focused on machine learning and artificial intelligence. I've got Jason Waller, the CEO with InteliCare, and they've just been awarded a $100,000 machine learning grant with Macquarie University and University of Sydney. So we're going to dive into InteliCare and how they're applying their AI. Jason, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
Very good. Now, you've just received, I don't know if you've got the money in your bank account just yet, but you've been awarded a $100,000 grant to further research into your machine learning. Maybe introduce us to InteliCare, who your partners are, and then we'll kind of dive into the intricacies of what you're actually doing. Very interesting.
So InteliCare turns any home into a smart home by installing a range of sensors around the home. We connect that to our IoT platform and then our AI engine, and we learn what's normal behaviour in that home with the aim to help the elderly and people with disability live in their homes for longer. So recently we partnered with the University of Sydney and Macquarie University to win a grant for $100,000 that will improve the machine learning capabilities of our platform, so that we not only detect trigger events that cause loss of independence, but start to get better at predicting those events before they occur in the first place.
And talk us through the sensors that you might be using and how many touch points you might have, and where the smarts are, because I think you touched on you've used traditional sensors, but then the integration of those and making them all kind of give you a picture or a dashboard picture. Yeah, talk us through the sensors and how you get them to work.
So we use commercial off-the-shelf sensors. Most people, when they're aging in place, resort to old technology like a pendant or a duress system or a push button to let their family or caregivers know when something is out in the ordinary and they need help. Unfortunately, that's very fallible. In 80% of falls, people didn't use their pendant, either because they didn't have it on them or it wasn't charged, or even in 30% of those cases, they had it on them, it was charged, and they didn't use it anyway. So we use non-invasive, non-wearable sensors wherever possible, things like the same things you'd find in your home security system, movement detectors, smart power switches, and door sensors and the like. We have a platform as a service, so the information is aggregated, and we track things like, have they arisen each day, what's the mobility like through the house, what's their bathroom usage, which can become particularly important. For example, if that increases overnight, it can point to an undiagnosed urinary tract infection. And UTIs are a primary cause of falls because it leads to delirium and then a fall. So we get away from people having to use wearables and compliance with that, which can be very poor, particularly in the aged care space, and use passive sensors and AI to look at that behaviour and find the patterns in it.
What if there's multiple people in the one room? How does that work?
Well, what we do is establish a baseline of behaviour in the house. So as long as there is a normal pattern, departures from those normal patterns are detected. So for instance, we've had some clients where we have a husband and wife, and one of those people has dementia or early onset dementia. And we've been able to detect that worsening dementia because we see increase in hyperactivity and even lower activity in the household, just attributed to that one person against the baseline.
And the type of sensors you mentioned, movements, are you using visual as well, say cameras, or can you apply visual over the top of that?
We very much avoid the use of cameras. The privacy is obviously a major concern for the elderly, and this notion of Big Brother watching them. And really it comes down to, what do you want to use a camera for? What is the information that you think you're getting from a camera that you can't get from the baseline sensor? Right. We have integrated an outstanding optical device that uses edge processing and machine vision to detect an immediate fall, so it can recognise furniture, animals and other parts of the house, different to a human being lying prone on the floor versus asleep on the couch or asleep on their bed. But none of that is captured as an image and it's not taken offline, and that's a particular niche case. So the beauty of our platform is we're sensor agnostic, and if there is a particular sensor out there that serves that purpose, we're happy to integrate it.
And do you put in the sensors? Is InteliCare, or you? Yeah. What's the onboarding process from a client's perspective? And maybe that's a key question. Who is your client? Is it the care provider? Is it the end user?
The client really is the care provider or the family member. The end user benefits because they are able to stay in their own home for longer, and they also don't want to be seen as any kind of burden on their family. But it's the family and the professional caregivers who receive the benefit, because they're the ones that manage the interventions that might otherwise cause loss of independence. They can, for example, arrange for an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist or a nutritionist to come into the household. We monitor things like meal usage, and that has a correlation to both movement and things like infection. So we start to piece these elements of the puzzle together. Our primary clients are the elderly and people with disability, particularly those who receive some form of government funding and a package to receive their care. Our product can be paid straight out of those packages.
So the focus here is health monitoring. Is there a safety aspect too in terms of the quality of the care that they might be getting?
There's always a safety aspect, and we're very careful to make sure that we don't overstep the mark or claim things that we can do beyond what we can do. But it's a world away and a world beyond from what is currently available to them, which is just duress devices, which I liken to, if you've got a P-plater, like I've had a few, if you give them a mobile phone and say this is going to prevent the car accident, you're kidding yourself. It's going to tell you that they've had an accident and call the tow truck or the ambulance, but it's going to do nothing with regard to their driving habits and road safety. So I think of it like that. It's like having the road safety campaign that prevents an accident before you have to call for the tow truck.
And what's the onboarding process? So if someone feels that they want to use your product or service, what's the onboarding?
So we use the term an off-the-shelf product. It can be installed, self-installed straight out of the box. If you're capable of installing, say, for example, a Sonos sound system or a Wi-Fi mesh in the house, it's very similar to that. We have a hub that connects to the internet in the home, and then each of the sensors is connected through that hub. For about half of our clients, we also arrange installation through a professional installer. And that's because typically their family members aren't nearby. They're not in the same state or remote, which is why they're using InteliCare in the first place. And so that in particular instance will arrange for a professional installer. But it's a very simple, straightforward process.
Just a question on the installer. Who do you tend to use? Because you've either got a licensed electrician or a licensed security installer. I don't know who else would be licensed to put that in. I'm talking from a probity perspective here.
There's no licensing required because there's no hard wiring required in the household. So it's been horses for courses in the locations we've serviced. So we've used, for example, Jim's Group, Antenna and Security. We've also used local smart home installers, as well as individuals who are proficient in installing, for example, internet and modems and those kinds of things.
Okay.
What we're most concerned with is they have a police check and that they have the right aptitude for dealing with the elderly.
Well, talk us through the grant. What's the background to the grant? Now, this is the grant was being awarded to or by the New South Wales Smart Sensing Network in conjunction with the University of Sydney and Macquarie University. It's great to see, and you're a Perth-based company too, so well done for getting that money out of New South Wales. They're pretty tight with it over here. Maybe talk us through the background to the grant, and I take it this is probably not a new thing. Yeah, how does all that work in the partnership?
Well, we've been working pretty closely with the University of Sydney. It's a prestigious organisation, and they brought in Macquarie University as well. And we've been setting up a program for them to engage with us and improve our machine learning through their computer science department, but also across their other departments that deal with ageing and healthcare. So they were the leaders and discovered that this grant was available. They brought in Macquarie University, their computer science department, who are also excellent and very innovative. And so we have a multidisciplinary team approach, because it's not just about the technologists. It has to be about those who are expert in ageing, and particularly gerontology and the signs of ageing and loss of independence.
Well, and I've noticed in the notes here, your company's putting in 150,000, and the universities are putting in another 160. So we're almost at a sort of a $350,000, $400,000 investment into this. Is this related, or any of the outcomes related to the Royal Commission into aged care, or is that a bit of an impetus there that you think has provided an extra business case?
Well, the subject of ageing is incredibly topical, right today, with the introduction once again of COVID into a residential aged care facility. And so consequently, the New South Wales Smart Sensing Network, which is a New South Wales government initiative, has ageing and resolving issues around ageing as one of their major themes, what they call mega challenges. So we fell off the back of that. The Royal Commission has been a huge impetus. In fact, InteliCare was cited in the final report as an example of a company using innovation to solve for some of the complex problems around aged care. Because what we're trying to do is prevent someone's progression along that aged care journey. So we look at relieving the burden on hospitals and residential facilities by catching events further upstream before they require more complex and much more expensive care. So by doing so, we start to address some of the structural issues around the aged care industry, which is basically there's not enough staff to meet the demand of the baby boomers moving from their retirement phase through to their aging phase.
And are you aggregating the data as well? Because we're about to talk about traffic congestion. So you're talking about an individual client in their own individual behaviour and health, and then are you aggregating that in total to go, well, that may not be unique to that particular user, but overall we're seeing an overall sign that there's a population change? I don't know, how are you kind of putting all that data together? Is that part of the research?
I see that in the blue sky.
Okay.
So the first stage of our research is to get the data into a format where it can be read and assimilated by machine learning neural networks, for instance. We haven't yet aggregated it at that level, but we see that definitely as part of the future and to improve clinical studies, while protecting the privacy and concerns of the individuals who actually own the data at the end of the day. So once we get our data cleansed in a format where we can start to really apply these machine learning techniques, then naturally I think looking at broader cohort-wide trends rather than individual trends starts to become really important.
And if it's, say, in an aged care facility, across the facility, and something that came out of the Royal Commission, particularly around the CCTV use, is that privacy aspect. Is this something you can apply across an aged care facility and have the facility or the manager as the client? And where does that privacy sort of cross over between what is healthcare versus what is personal monitoring, if you know what I mean, in terms of that, that fine line?
So our first customers have been in the home care industry. So there's about 1.2 million people who actually receive home care support. It's much bigger than what people might think of in terms of aged care, primarily being around nursing homes. There's about 200,000 people in nursing homes, so 1/5 of that home care market. Nevertheless, our product is suitable for residential aged care, and it will allow those care providers not only to detect the incidents they might otherwise miss through staff can't be everywhere at once, but also understand the complex needs of their clients as they start to age, and therefore increase the funding that's available there for them. In terms of privacy, it's really about the rights of the individual to manage their risk. So what they are doing here is looking at the risks as they wish to see it, and allowing us to use their data, and their carers and family to use their data to reduce that risk. So we put the independent adult at the centre of this. It's their data and it's their life. So they've got to be able to have control over that.
Do they sign up? There's obviously an opt-in and they sign in. Is that all electronic, and then is there an opt-out?
Yes, so as we said before, the client really is the caregivers and the family members who are the ones that procure, and we require them to ensure they have consent from the independent adult before the system goes in.
Okay. Maybe talk us into the company. You're an ASX listed company, and I think you mentioned 2017 pre-interview. What's the background to the company? What's the pedigree in being in this space? It sounds like this isn't necessarily a new play, but it certainly sounds innovative.
So the company was started by our co-founders in 2017 when they received a WA Country Health Service Royalty for Regions grant, with the purpose being to build this kind of technology to help people in regional Western Australia stay in their country towns and not have to move to the city to access aged care and those kinds of services. And our original customers are still out there today. We've got a 93-year-old woman who is blind and elderly, who's staying in her own home in her country town because with her stepdaughter in Perth. Since then, they spent about 2 years from 2017 to 2019 developing the technology, and then 2019 to 20 we sought funding and achieved listing in May 2020 on the ASX. Since then, we've been executing on our commercialisation strategy.
And where are you operating? Is it just Australia at this stage, or are you able to operate from anywhere? What's your scale?
Our strategy was to get it right in Western Australia before we expanded onto the East Coast, because obviously there's always, with any new technology, bugs and wrinkles to be ironed out. And we've largely done that, although there's always things we'd like to improve in the system. We have a significant number of clients both in New South Wales and Victoria, and some in Queensland. And now that we've got that settled, we're starting to look at overseas opportunities, and particularly in the USA, Canada, and the United Kingdom.
Just back to the ML, are you using standard algorithms and it's just a matter of picking up the right sensors and then getting, where's the smarts, what you've done in terms of you've built the dashboard and applied basic machine learning algorithms? And you mentioned there's probably a bit of AI in the background. Is anything new in terms of the algorithms, or is this just what we're seeing in a sort of IoT industry 4.0 of what is capable?
Well, I think AI is a very broad spectrum, and machine learning is a subset of that spectrum in the Venn diagram. So we've been using artificial intelligence to learn what a baseline of behaviour is in a household. When someone gets up, what their normal pattern of meal preparation is, whether they've prepared a meal at all, and what their normal movement looks like, and then send out alerts when there's deviations to certain degrees from that. The machine learning element is training a specific algorithm to look for a specific type of incident, and that we haven't yet done that. We've begun it with falls detection, and now we're using it for prevention of those incidents. So we're moving from detection through to prevention. We're hosted on the Microsoft Azure platform, so we've aggregated a number of those tools and applications to build our platform. But there's nothing particularly unique about ML. A neural network piece of code is only about 70 lines long. It's not complex. There's nothing, and it's all open source. There's not a lot that's particularly new in that space. What the first phase of this project will be about is identifying what is the best form of machine learning to use, whether it's assisted machine learning or non-assisted, or a combination of those elements, and what fits with the data the best. And that's where the expertise really starts to hit the road, rather than in the algorithms themselves.
And what about staying on track in terms of, because our audience is strongly security, so I sense there's a security play here as well, even just generally domestic home security. You talked about detecting falls. Well, you could potentially detect a new or a foreign body in the house if it's a burglary or something like that. But then also around just the general home and the way that all the sensors in the home are performing, and preventative maintenance. You're very focused on sticking to user and health, and not expanding out and adding in to that platform other types of ML.
It's one of those things that in a startup, it's really important at the outset to stay focused and not chase every shiny trinket. And when you're dealing with software developers, they're very keen to work on their individual science projects, and so part of my role is keeping that core. That doesn't mean we don't look adjacent left and right to what's available to us, and asset protection has been something that is on our agenda. And in fact, we have a test rig here in the office that integrates things like smart smoke alarms and circuit boards and RCDs to look after a home, particularly in the social housing environment. This could be particularly important. And our asset could be, our platform could be modified to produce that kind of product in the end. But it's a question of making sure we get it right with what we're doing first before we expand.
Are you working with other partners in that particular space, or again, you're an ASX listed company, so you're going to be commercially driven? But do you find you're working with partners? I can rattle off half a dozen over there in Perth right now. That I don't know where you're based, whether you're in Bentley or elsewhere, but there's a few in this area.
Yeah, I used to be down in Bentley in my previous gig when I was with Spookfish, which was a geospatial imagery company.
Right.
But no, we're in Leederville in Western Australia, close to the city. And we have a number of partners that we work with. And that's part of the beauty of our platform, because it is cloud-based and because it's open architecture, we can integrate with other platforms as well.
Very good. So Jason Waller, CEO with InteliCare, definitely the ASX listed company, so one to watch. What's your ASX code?
ICR, iCare.
ICR, iCare, so one to watch, and hopefully, good luck in the future, and stay in touch in terms of your security applications, but then also we'll monitor this moving forward with the University of Macquarie University and University of Sydney.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. I'll put you backstage.